Hey everyone, welcome to today's talk. This talk is going to be about how to level up your tech skills so you can build better products. My name is Rachel Moore, and let's get started. So just to kick us off here, who am I? So I'm Rachel, I just mentioned that. I've been in product for about 3 years now. I made the switch to product after business school, and before business school, I was an engineer for a few years. Throughout my whole career and in my time as a product manager, I've worked with a bunch of different technologies, a bunch of different products, a bunch of different industries. And this talk here is kind of a culmination of a lot of the things that I feel like I've learned over a few years, and I want to share with you guys so that you don't have to make the same mistakes that I did. So who is this talk for? I think, you know, before we get into it too much, don't worry if you have a technical background or not. I think that this is important information for anyone to know. So, you know, if you don't have a CS degree, like, no problem. This is also for you if you want to improve your relationships with your eng or technical partners, or you want to even have even better relationships with them. I think it's also really relevant if you want to kind of future-proof like the products that you work on, and also your own product management methodology. Or maybe you're also, maybe like all those things feel pretty good for you, but you just want to know more about the actual like tech behind the tech industry. So some goals for today's talk. By the end of this, I would feel like I did my job for you. If you agree that enhancing your technical knowledge is important, if you feel like you have some tactics that you're ready to apply with some of the technical teams that you work with, and I think most importantly, you have an accountability plan so that you actually follow through and take some of these actions. So just to set expectations up front, what this talk isn't is a primer on AI and like some of the more technical details of like what that entails. There's many resources online. Product School has some great resources as well. It's also not an interview guide. So, you know, again, many other resources that would do a way better job of that than I would. So before we get into the real meat of this, I also just want to clarify terminology here. You know, I think especially in product, there's so many different words that we use, and sometimes they mean different things to different people. So I just really want to make sure that it's clear, at least when I'm, you know, using terms, what I'm referring to. So here, you know, even in the title of my talk, it was how to level up your tech skills. So like, what is tech in this case? And how I'm using that is to refer to anything that's used to actually, you know, build and implement a product. So that could be, you know, code, also data, you know, is like another aspect of that. I think one distinction I want to make is that when I say technical, I don't mean analytical. You know, I'm not really talking about like your ability to, you know, run a query or something like that. It's not that I don't think that's important. It definitely is. But that's just not the focus of my talk today. So now that we've talked about what technical means, why does it matter, right? I mean, you know, I guess we're all kind of told like, oh yeah, you know, you're a PM, you work on tech products, like, sure, you know, there's like an aspect of that. But just to really clarify that point, this is one of my favorite XKCD comics. And I think, you know, as PMs, or aspiring PMs, you know, we've all had a moment very similar to this one. And you think you have like this great idea, and you're like, how hard could it be? And it's, you know, it's apparently it's very hard from a technical perspective. So, you know, this is maybe a little bit lighthearted and starting to get at, you know, why it's important to kind of like understand, you know, like the technical landscape. But here's maybe a more like real life example. This is just a screenshot from Blind, which is that like professional anonymous social network. You know, and so here I guess there's this PM who was an engineer, turned PM, you know, I guess lamenting about maybe some of the product managers that they work with, and how they're not particularly technical and don't necessarily like communicate the right things to the technical teams that they work with. You know, and I guess ultimately this poster is concerned about like the impact that that would have on the overall experience for the end users. I think the other poster here certainly makes like a great point of, you know, engineers and, you know, technical partners, they're going to be the experts on the implementation, but there is, of course, like this interplay between, you know, your technical partners and you as the PM for, you know, thinking about how to deliver that end user experience. That is really important. And if you kind of lack the, you know, vocabulary and understanding to have those conversations, I think that's really like the point that I'm trying to make here in this talk. So why now? You know, like we've been, you know, product has been around for a while. You know, like the world has seen some really amazing like products come into existence, and we've gotten on like just fine. So so product management as a discipline is changing. I would argue that that's in large part because product complexity is increasing. More and more products are leveraging machine learning nowadays. There's also, you know, a greater focus on security and privacy as well. And all three of these things are very technical in terms of the nature of the solutions to power those. Also, you know, with modern day tech products, they touch millions of users all around the globe. And companies and PMs that work at them, you know, can't necessarily afford to not think through some of the impact that using, you know, these new like these new technologies that it will have on their customers. So, you know, I think there's been plenty of examples of this in recent times where, you know, if you're a social network and you're only recommending content based on content that users have interacted with and engaged with previously, you could potentially create some sort of, you know, an echo chamber. And if that's not necessarily the intended experience that you want your users to have, you know, that's not great. And you want to, you know, be sure that whatever systems you're using to deliver these experiences to your users, that they are, of course, actually delivering those intended experiences. So I would then argue that the next wave of best-in-class products will be developed by PMs who really do, you know, embrace this new way of thinking about products, and really do have, you know, some handle and some basic understanding of, you know, what it means to incorporate machine learning in a product, what it means to have, you know, to really value security and privacy for users. I have an example just here on the slide. You know, imagine that you have some sort of like a biased algorithm and it's deployed to end-to-end, it's deployed to end users. You know, I would argue that's kind of on the PM, right? Like you're responsible for delivering experiences to end users. And so something went wrong with this launch, right? You know, you can't just say, oh, well, the machine learning team, like they had this biased algorithm. And I would also argue, you know, in this other example, of if you have a product experience that's generating, you know, poor quality training data, which is used in these machine learning models, that should also be a PM concern because, you know, presumably you're using those models for a reason and you need them to be high quality in terms of whenever application that they're serving. But if you can't provide good quality training data to even create those models, you know, you're not going to be able to deliver that experience that you want. So just to kind of throw a metaphor on this, I kind of think of machine learning as like a kitchen knife. So, you know, it's, I think everyone will use it, but I think, you know, only a few will really use it very well or properly. And so it's easy to cut yourself. So hopefully that metaphor makes sense. You know, just to unpack that a little bit, So machine learning is really powerful because it can uncover patterns that humans can't. But, you know, a machine learning model, it doesn't have like user empathy, you know? You can't say, oh, like machine learning model, you know, we have users and they're this age range and, you know, they tend to, you know, do these hobbies on weekends, and they tend to have like these jobs. Like machine learning model, like they don't care, right? It's just data that gets fed in, and they like, you know, the machine learning model, you know, looks for these patterns. And so with that, how do you know if you're providing the right intended experience and value to your actual target customers? So what can be done about this? What can you do to try and avoid some of these pitfalls? So again, just to emphasize, I really don't think that you need to have a CS degree to do this work. So, you know, let's put on our growth mindset hats, like throw away like the limiting beliefs. I think the biggest thing really is your own motivation. The only prerequisite I would really say is that you need to set your ego aside if you really want to like embark on this journey of leveling up your tech skills. So, you know, for every single one of the next few slides, I would say ideally you ask whoever your tech partners are in your job, or even just friends that you have who work in more technical roles, ask them for resources that they would recommend. I think also like not being afraid to like ask stupid questions. You know, it's really okay, especially if you think back to, you know, some of the previous slides. Some of your tech partners probably don't already expect you to like know anything about tech. So really, you're not really gonna show that you like didn't necessarily understand the nuances and details of whatever you're asking about. They probably already assume that you don't know anything about that. And so really, I would recommend like using the topics that I'll talk about more so as like a framework for how to build out your own knowledge and initiate discussions with your tech partners. So just to give us a little bit of a roadmap for these next few slides, I didn't come up with any sort of catchy name for this, like something hierarchy of needs, but you can kind of think of it that way. So first we'll talk a little bit about systems thinking. I really think of that as like the foundation of all of this, and then we'll work through some more general technical points, machine learning, and then ending with data. So systems thinking. I think this is something that is becoming a little bit more of a buzzword these days in Silicon Valley. Normally I hate buzzwords, but I really do believe in the power of systems thinking. So I wanted to mention it here. I think especially when we're thinking about, you know, these more like technical aspects, they really are just, you know, complex systems. And so if you're going to be able to have like deeper discussions with your technical partners, you kind of need to be able to talk and understand and think in terms of systems. And so just to kind of illustrate two examples of systems thinking not being used, you have these people in this boat and it's sinking. Obviously, you know that as time goes on, the whole boat is going to sink and soon everyone's going to be in the water. But you know, those two at the end there aren't necessarily thinking about the system that is the sinking boat and thinking that they're fine. And then this person on the right of the slide here, they're going to get knocked over the head by this domino once it has to, once these dominoes go all the way around. So you don't want to think in these ways. Here's an example, a positive example of what systems thinking might look like. So this is for a cup of tea, and you can see all the different ways that this is kind of like mapped and modeled out. And of course too, right, like this isn't just a closed system. If you really wanted to zoom into, you know, like how electricity is created, that would be like a whole subsystem. Or you like really wanted to zoom into, you know, like the tea growing process, right? There's like different levels of abstraction that you can layer on top of systems. And, you know, that's kind of the power of this way of thinking, is that you can abstract away complexity if you don't, you know, if it doesn't make sense to deal with that. So great, let's say that you feel like you can think in terms of systems, no problem. Like what can you do? What can you do next? So going back to that hierarchy that we had, I would say the next thing that you can start thinking about is your just general technical awareness. And with that, I think the best way to think about is the product that you own or the product that you work on. So I think there's two pieces to this. One is what are kind of the theory or like the best practices in terms of the like the tech that's used in a product like that. So for example, let's say you have a mobile app, right? So like what is the general kind of like architecture or like technology that's used in a mobile app? I kind of think of that interview question, you know, of like what happens when I type in yahoo.com in my URL bar, you know, I hit enter, and going through that kind of like that, except not an interview question, so like not as much pressure, but just to understand like what at a high level for a mobile app, you know, in general, if that's your product, like how does that, you know, generally work? And then so the other a very important piece of that is then in reality, like can you kind of draw out for your specific product, not just like in general what like the best practice is of what, you know, like a block diagram might look like. So, you know, for a web app, that could be something like, you know, you have your data and you have like your back end, your front end, and then your end user or something like that. So here again, just to emphasize, I think it's really very valuable to talk to your engineering team, to talk to any sort of technical partners that you have who work on supporting that implementation for you. Because that's really, I think that dialogue is, again, also how you build those relationships and how you start to like, you know, really build out and uncover some like nuances that might exist. And, you know, that's where it's going to be different from in theory versus reality. And if your company has an engineering blog, you could also check that out too. And, you know, maybe just try and read through it, right? And if you have questions about it, you can talk to, maybe the authors are at your company still and you can go talk to them. If they're not, you can, you know, find your best engineering buddy at the company and just, you know, talk to them about it, really. So in case a block diagram sounds kind of scary, like what, and, you know, if you've never heard that before, you don't know what that's supposed to look like. So here's an example of what a block diagram looks like, in case that kind of sounds like a scary concept or you're not really sure what that really entails. So it really could be something as simple as a couple of, you know, rectangles and a couple of arrows between them. It really doesn't have to be complicated. And if you remember what I was saying before about systems and subsystems, and, you know, you can like double click on some of these, that's also something you could do, right? Like once you kind of have a high level picture of what's going on for your product, you can say, okay, like I want to understand more about, you know, in this case, how it works with the cache server sending and receiving information to the database. And so you can just like go down these various rabbit holes and like slowly fill in, you know, your kind of mental model of how your product works. So the next step in that hierarchy was this machine learning step. I kind of think of it as like the machine learning value chain in a way. So that is, you know, the infrastructure to support the, you know, machine learning, you know, training and deployment and all of that, processes, you know, human processes that support all of that, and of course the data aspect as well. So here again, I think it's important to split out into kind of theory and best practices, just so that you kind of go in and have an understanding at an initial level of how, you know, machine learning, the kind of machine learning value chain works. And once you have that understanding, you know, again, in reality for your particular product, if it does use AI or it will use it, how does that map to, you know, what that theory and best practices are? You know, and importantly, like, what's missing, right? Like, what's necessary in order to achieve the goals that you have for your product and for your users, the problems that you want to solve for them. Here's, you know, just an image of, like, at a high level of some of the basic steps about, you know, the machine learning process. Obviously, you know, this is again, this is a system, right? And so you could, you know, double click on each step here and learn more about that. So now, if we've done the systems thinking, we've done the technical awareness, we've talked about machine learning, and the last step is the data. So remember that machine learning models, they're created by people, right? Like, computers, we're not yet to the point of, you know, general artificial intelligence. And until we get there, you know, machine learning models will be, you know, created by people. And as a PM, one of the biggest ways that you can influence these machine learning models is on the data. And so, you know, that's like the data sets that are used for training, the quality of that data, and last but definitely not least, the evaluation criteria for these models. If you remember, you know, one thing that I mentioned before, as far as, you know, how do you ensure that the experience that you're providing to all of your target users is actually your intended experience, this is where having a really great and well-defined and well-understood, you know, set of evaluation criteria can be really useful. Here are some examples of things that you could do to try and, you know, have this plan for your data. You could have, you know, work with your technical partners and establish processes for monitoring bias in the data. You could also, you know, set up simulations and test cases and things like that to be sure that you're, you know, providing that desired and intended experience for your target users. And just remember, like, with these machine learning models, like, the devil is really in the details, and you're dealing with, in a production environment, you're dealing with, like, reality, right? And so you never, you might have a user who has a really poor experience, and you're like, gosh, I don't understand, you know, why this user got this particular result. Just remember, like, these models are very complex, and there's a bunch of different signals that they might be looking at. And so you really have to be very, you know, detail-oriented and methodical as you're trying to think about these types of products and, you know, the systems that support them. So, and the last thing that I want to mention too, now that we've kind of gone through this hierarchy, it's like totally okay if you're starting and you're like, I don't even know if I'm thinking in terms of systems or not. You know, it's also totally fine if you're like, you know, maybe I have, like, some technical awareness for my product, but I don't know anything about, like, AI or machine learning. Like, that, I think that's also fine, right? Like, the whole idea is that, you know, you're aware that there's other things that you could learn about, and that you just start, like, chipping away at it, right? Like, you're not going to be, you know, like, you're not going to turn into your like your end lead, right? Like, that's still, they still have that job, you'll still be a PM, like, that's totally fine. It's just to give you that additional context and this additional vocabulary so that when you have conversations with these partners, you know, you can make more educated decisions, and you can also, you know, give context for them that you think is relevant now that you kind of have that additional knowledge. So, you know, really don't be intimidated by any of this, and just make sure you take it just one step at a time. So I mentioned at the very beginning the accountability piece. So if it's possible, find someone else who is attending this talk, or send your notes or a link to a coworker or a PM friend that you have, you know, and set up some time to discuss with them. Again, in the spirit of just making baby steps towards enhancing and increasing your technical knowledge. Even if you just like try to draw out some sort of a block diagram for your system, like that's awesome. Be super proud of yourself. You know, and think about how much you would possibly learn even doing that. So here are just a few end takeaways. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully you were able to, you know, take away some questions, maybe even already in your mind for, you know, tomorrow or, you know, whenever you talk to your technical partners next that you might want to bring up with them. So that's all. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions. I love talking about this stuff, so I would be happy to hear from you. I hope everyone's you know, staying safe and healthy out there. Bye.